China has been suggested to have the advantage over the U.S. in a potential conflict over the Asia-Pacific, according to a maritime professor. Lyle Goldstein, research professor at the Naval War College's China Maritime Studies Institute, said the U.S. would likely lose a first fight with the People's Liberation Army or PLA. Washington and Beijing have repeatedly raised tensions with naval drills in disputed Asian waters over the past year, with China enraged over the U.S.'s support of Taiwan and presence in the South China Sea. Mr. Goldstein warned it is very plausible the U.S. has no guarantee of victory in the first phases. While the expert accepted China and U.S. conflict scenarios vary wildly, he added all of them are extremely challenging for Washington. Mr. Goldstein argued the situation is actually considerably darker for U.S. troops beyond the opening rounds of a potential conflict. He added, he thinks China now has adequate forces, including air, missile, electronic warfare, spec ops, naval, undersea and nuclear to likely prevail in the first phase and perhaps in subsequent phases too. Mr. Goldstein said China's weaponry is quite important in giving an edge over the U.S., but he said Beijing mainly has an upper hand over the U.S. because of favorable geography and thus interior lines greater will core interests and a willingness to strike first. The expert then referenced flashpoints of U.S. with China tension, including Taiwan and the South China Sea. In regards to Taiwan, Mr. Goldstein suggested a conflict over the island exaggerates all these advantages for China. James E. Fennell, a retired U.S. Navy captain who served as Director of Intelligence and Information Operations for the U.S. Pacific Fleet, also told Newsweek China has caught up with U.S. military power. He said over the course of the past 2 decades the PRC has changed the military balance of power across the Indo-Pacific, beyond outproducing the U.S. Navy in the number of warships at a rate of 4-to-1. The PLA Strategic Rocket Force has put U.S. aircraft carriers at risk with the fielding of the DF-21D and DF-26 anti-carrier ballistic missiles. The PLA's counter-intervention strategy, just a concept 2 decades ago, is now a reality within the second island chain, and continues to expand at an alarming rate across the rest of the region. U.S. President Joe Biden has promised to defend Taiwan's sovereignty and to challenge China's aggression in the South China Sea. In February, the guided missile destroyer USS Russell steamed within 12 nautical miles of the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea, almost all of which Beijing claims as its sovereign territory. Lieutenant Joe Kiley, a spokesman for the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet, said in a statement, "This Freedom of Navigation Operation FONOP upheld the rights, freedoms and lawful uses of the sea recognized in international law by challenging unlawful restrictions on innocent passage imposed by China, Vietnam and Taiwan." A spokesman for the PLA warned in a report the operation seriously violated China's sovereignty and security, gravely undermined regional peace and stability, and deliberately disrupted the good atmosphere of peace, friendship and cooperation in the South China Sea. China regards Taiwan as part of its mainland territory, and has threatened to reclaim the island by force. But the Chinese Defense Ministry's Information Bureau said in a statement on Monday it will not take any more land in response to a question on China's national defense strategy. They said, "They cannot lose a single inch of the lands we inherited from our ancestors, and we would not take a single cent of others' possessions." It then added, "Never expanding and never seeking spheres of influence are the distinctive features of China's national defense in the new era." Related to this, the U.S. hailed by NATO ally Germany to sail a warship across the contested South China Sea to U.S. help, U.S. calling it support for a rules-based international order in the region, something Washington says is threatened by China. German government officials said on Tuesday a German frigate would set sail for Asia in August and, on its return journey, become the first German warship to cross the South China Sea since 2002. The U.S. has a on national interest in the maintenance of peace and stability, respect for international law, lawful unimpeded commerce, and freedom of navigation and other lawful uses of the sea, a spokeswoman for the U.S. State Department said. The U.S. welcomed Germany's support for a rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific. The international community has a vital stake in the preservation of an open maritime order. A spokesman for the Foreign Ministry in China, which claims most of the South China Sea, said countries enjoyed freedom of navigation and overflight in the waterway under international law, but added, they cannot take it as an excuse to undermine the sovereignty and security of littoral countries. German officials said the warship would not pass within the 12 nautical mile limits China and rival states claim as territorial waters around contested features in the strategic waterway. China has established military outposts on artificial islands it has built in the South China Sea, and Washington has rejected Beijing's disputed claims to offshore resources in most of the sea as completely unlawful. The U.S. Navy regularly conducts freedom of navigation operations in which its warships pass close by to some of these islands. It has been keen for allies to follow suit. Last month, France said a French nuclear-propelled attack submarine and warship patrolled in the South China Sea to underscore freedom of navigation. Meanwhile, a Royal Navy aircraft carrier could come under cyberattack when it enters waters near China on its grand voyage later this year. Chinese forces could attempt to block the Royal Navy's signals, spread false information, and conduct phishing attacks on countries where the HMS Queen Elizabeth docks in East Asia, according to reports. Earlier this week, the Royal Navy aircraft carrier departed from Portsmouth to sail off for sea trials ahead of its first deployment in the spring. China has claimed a large part of the South China Sea as its own, which has triggered territorial disputes. Taiwan reportedly told The Times that the international community should pay close heed to this growing aggressiveness of China and welcomed the HMS Queen Elizabeth's deployment in the region. The independent island reported large incursions by Chinese warplanes into its air defense zone earlier this year. Boris Johnson last year confirmed that the HMS Queen Elizabeth will be at the center of a strike group deployment to the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and East Asia. Last month, Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said, "The most significant Royal Navy deployment in a generation demonstrates the UK's commitment to working with our partners in the region to uphold the rules-based international system and promote our shared security and prosperity." Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab also said the move was part of the UK's tilt towards the Indo-Pacific region post-Brexit. The aircraft carrier is expected to sail into the South China Sea to conduct freedom of navigation patrols. The ship will reportedly carry out military exercises with Japan and the US in the waters near Japan's Ryukyu Islands. A recently retired military officer told The Times there would be a severe threat from so-called gray zone attacks during the aircraft carrier's deployment. They added, China is likely to try and interfere with the deployment through cyberattack. The retired officer said that such incidents, which could include a disinformation campaign, would not sink the carrier, but the reputational risk is high.